Thanks for joining us tonight for Hit and Run, a cold case solved. I'm AJ Lagoe. Tonight, we're taking an in-depth look at a tragic hit and run that left the Louisa family wondering for 18 years who killed their loved one and the similarities this case has with the still unsolved death of a 17-year-old Goochland boy. Now, we do need to warn you, some of the content in this story is graphic.
It's a story that begins with a father dead in the road, an unmarked grave, a grieving family with memories, but no answers.
I got a mental picture. At the same time, it's not the same as being held by your dad, being told that you're loved.
And years later, another father and husband led away in handcuffs.
Well, this was a difficult and tragic case on both sides.
The tragedy began the night of February 18th, 1994. 34-year-old Army veteran John Banks Jr. is run over, left for dead in the middle of the road.
Yeah, my best friend. I mean, my dad is not just my dad, it was my best friend.
Kendra Banks was just 15 years old the night she lost her father. To see his face, she has just her memories and 3 old Army photos.
Really hard, because I lost my best friend. Someone who I was always with, someone who was always there for me.
John Banks' fiancée, Virginia Smith,
me and him was planning on getting married and stuff, and all that ended for me.
recalls the last time she saw the man she planned to spend her life with.
He had come home from work that afternoon, and he told me, he said, well, I'm going to go down the road, visit some friends for a little while, and I have to go to work tomorrow morning. He said, I'll be home at 10.
He would never make it home from visiting his cousin, James Morris, who lived just over a mile down Route 22, or Louisa Road, as the locals call it.
No, I'm cousin. Yeah, we were tight.
Morris says after hanging out, his cousin got on his blue scooter and left for home.
Banks would only make a few hundred yards before losing control and falling right in this area.
The police report at the time shows a diagram of the scene and states driver crashed his moped while driving east. At some point after driver was laying in the eastbound lane, he was struck by an unknown eastbound vehicle.
We found Mr. Banks laying in the road, and of course he was already dead.
Roger Brooks was one of the first people to discover the gruesome scene.
Louisa dispatch had asked me to check and see if the man had a pulse, but obviously he didn't have a pulse. He was already gone.
Family members showed up at Virginia Smith's door with the news.
And they said, Virginia, it's been an accident. I said, what? Said, John has been hit. I said, oh, really? She said, yeah. I said, oh, okay, so we got to get ready to go to the hospital? No, he's dead. So we went up to the accident that night, but they wouldn't let us even go nowhere near it.
While the search began for the runaway driver, tragedy continued to affect John Banks' family.
After my father was killed, our house got broken into 3 days later, and then a week later, my mom got laid off her job.
It would take years for the family to pay for Banks' funeral.
And he's buried next to his grandmother?
Mm-hmm.
While the church donated this small marker, the family never could afford a proper headstone to place on his grave.
We wanted a headstone, but we just couldn't afford to get one.
And to make matters worse, the search for the hit-and-run driver turned into a dead end as the case went cold.
The last investigative report is marked 4/27/94, 2 months after Banks' death. The detective writes, no further leads exist to this date.
All we wanted to know was who did this and, why, if it was an accident or he meant to do it.
Who did it? It's a question that would haunt Banks' daughter Kendra for the next 16 years.
A lot of things that you go through in your life, you wish you had your father there to talk to protect you, to be there. And, of course, I had to go without.
Kendra grew up, had her own children, but never could let go of the questions surrounding her dad's death.
I have days where I'm feeling down and out and don't have nobody to talk to, and I'll come up and sit on his grave and talk to him a while.
16 years passes. In 2010, working with state police, a still emotional Banks family addressed the media.
He's not going to be at our first wedding to be able to walk us down the aisle. He's not going to be there when the grandkids are born or nothing like that. It's
pleading for information that would solve the cold case.
I just want my dad to rest in peace.
We're not blaming anybody, and we don't want, to seek revenge on anyone or anything like that.
And give them closure.
Whoever had the accident to just come forth and say, hey, I'm sorry, so we can forgive them. We can have the type of closure that we need.
The next day, there was suddenly something new for investigators to put in their reports.
New information provided by an anonymous tip has led to identifying 3 suspects. It continues. Based on statements made by the driver, Brandon Lee Fields, a warrant for felony hit and run was obtained and served on September 10th, 2010.
Mr. Fields, AJ Lagoe, 8 News. Can we talk with you about the charges against you?
We caught up with Brandon Fields outside his first court appearance. Dressed in a suit and tie with his wife by his side, 35-year-old Fields refuses to answer our questions. When we pushed, he only had this to say.
You know I can't talk about an ongoing case.
It's a case Louisa Commonwealth Attorney Rusty McGuire says never should have come about.
If he would have stopped back then, would he have been facing charges at all?
He would not, and that's, again, the sad point.
Turns out Fields was just 18 years old when he ran over John Banks, who was already lying in the road in the dark at the top of a hill.
Had he just stopped and communicated his information or called the police, he could have gone about his business like never happened. But instead, he just had to live with the pain for 18 years, knowing he had a secret.
Fields, now married with a child of his own, has never been in trouble with the law, weighing a, by all accounts, exemplary life against one extremely bad decision. McGuire, working with the Banks family, orchestrated what can only be described as an unorthodox conclusion to the case.
This is justice for the family?
This is certainly justice, and the family was completely happy.
We'll have that part of the story after the break. Stay with us. And welcome back to Hit and Run, a cold case solved. 18 years after his death, John Banks' family signs off on an unorthodox sentence for the man who ran over their loved one, leaving him to die in the road.
My family is a very religious family, believe heavily in the Bible. We don't want to judge anyone. We wasn't holding a grudge.
Recognizing that Brandon Fields was a teenager when he made that terrible decision to leave the accident scene, he was offered this very unique plea agreement.
Fields agreed to plead guilty to a reduced charge of misdemeanor hit and run, for which he'll serve a year behind bars. He also reimbursed the victim's family the $6,000 they paid in funeral costs and is buying a tombstone for John Banks, which will read, "Loving father, brother, and husband."
But here's the real unorthodox part of this sentence. Every year on February 18th, the anniversary of the accident, Brandon Fields will come here to John Banks' gravesite and place flowers on it.
The family tells us this is justice enough.
I think it was a fair judgment. I'm sorry that he has to spend that time in jail away from his family, because I know how it feels for you to lose someone in your family.
In court, Fields offered an emotional apology to the Banks family. Choking back tears, he said, "I was young, I was scared, but that is no excuse. I should have stayed and told police what happened."
He was very emotional, he was very hurt, and he was very sorry for what he did, and we accepted it.
In an effort for some good to come from this tragic situation, Brandon Fields also made a plea in court for the driver of another cold case hit and run to come forward.
17-year-old Billy Lee Maxwell was killed in September of 2010 by a hit-and-run driver on Broad Street Road in Goochland. A memorial and reward poster mark where he died.
It's shattered our lives, you know, and we're picking up the pieces, trying to, you know, learn how to live without him.
Billy's mom, Christina, tells us she's now living with the same questions.
The biggest question is why? Why would you leave him to die?
It took the Banks family 18 years to have answered.
I just want to thank God that, you know, the Banks family has the answers that they need, that they've waited so long to get. If I can't imagine going that long, I hope that I don't have to go that long.
Two drivers who didn't stop. Two families who've lived with the same type of pain. But one now has answers in peace that the other can only pray for.
I know that the mama is hurting, you know, that someone killed her son, and they don't know who did this to their son, you know. And I hope that whoever did it, I hope someone will come forth and just tell who did this.
If you know who hit Billy Maxwell, contact the Goochland County Sheriff's Department, or you can call Crime Stoppers. That number, 780-1000. Thanks for joining us for this 8 News Extra. I'm AJ Lagoe.